You're listening to the Yeshiva of Newark at IDT podcast. I'm your host and curator, Rabbi Abram Kibalevich, and I hope you enjoy this episode. You've bought your tickets. The ushers are about to open the doors. Yes, the Projectionist has Semicha is about to start. But first, if you own a retail business and accept credit cards, your customers are getting points, miles, and all sorts of rewards every time they use their card. And you're paying the price. That's why NRS Pay, a product of National Retail Solutions, a division of the IDT Corporation, offers its cash discount program FeeBuster. You can start accepting credit cards for free. If your business processes over $18,000 a month, you pay no monthly fee and $0 out of your pocket for transaction. This means you, as a retailer, can enjoy the benefits of accepting plastic, and your customers still get those crucial miles they crave and need. NRS Pay FeeBuster provides every client with a free credit card reader with no long-term contract, no early termination fee, cancel anytime without a penalty. I'm personally familiar with this company, and they truly stand by their product, and they'll help you with live, stateside-based customer service on any issue or question. Visit nrspay.com or call 833-289-2767 to learn more about NRS Pay and the fantastically fair FeeBuster. Clear the aisles, the Projectionist, says Smicha. Hi, Yitzchak, I'm here with you today, and I think one of the most overused words in our lexicon, and it overflows, of course, into film and television, is the word miracle. It's as overused as I might be offending some people, that the word miracle similarly is overused, whether it's the miracle on ice in terms of how the U.S. was able to be, as the underdog, defeat the great super Russian powered ice hockey team. This was before, of course, that they would send NHL professionals to play. Or in various sports, besides ice hockey, the Music City Miracle, a way that the Tennessee Titans came back with a kickoff return in the last few seconds with a number of laterals that led to a touchdown. The music, again, in sports, you're right, God is behind everything. And perhaps in some ways, calling everything a miracle makes sense, but that's not really what it means. Somehow, when things don't turn out the way we expect them, or something interesting, unusual happens, we try to frame it. And I'm going to suggest that when we frame it as a miracle, we do a disservice in a way to the idea of God's showing his love, his presence, his power in a way that we need to somehow respond and celebrate that specific day as far as Judaism goes. I don't want this. It's like, I know we're going to start turning this into a discussion about when you are koveya a yom as a yom nes or not, and what sort of miracle it has to be. This is that would be.
It's something that's lifted up. It's a banner that's lifted up. So not if everything's lifted up, nothing's lifted up.
Right, you're right. Yitzchak is referring to the etymology of the word nes, which in Hebrew is similar to the term for a flag. Nes is no seisbo, something that you want everybody to see as special. And again, we've just finished the holiday of Purim, which for many people doesn't seem like such a miraculous day. And people struggle with discovering the hand of God in terms of that miracle. So again, we know, and I think we're satisfied with each person recognizing the miracles that got them through life. But there's a difference between, it's a miracle that I was able to make the plane. Then let's say your Rosh Hashiva, Shalom, talking about the miracle that and that he speaks about on the YouTube video, where they could have just shot and he was on top of a benzene truck, and if they would have shot the bullets upwards, it would have exploded. Or the fact that when he arrived to the camp, they were instead of being just wiped out as a meaningless person in the work camp, that his father was able to somehow have enough money to bribe the commandant. Those I could see. We should refer to these things as miracles. And we have to see that there's no logical way to perhaps explain why, especially when we know it's towards someone good and someone positive. But I think that television and movies have overused films and television programs, that they use this term miracle, don't even really reckon with the fact, it was a divine miracle from God. Miracle just has become disconnected from God as well. I remember, the very weird quarterback of the Green Bay Packers, Aaron Rodgers, after a loss in the NFC Championship game to the Seattle Seahawks, quarterback by Russell Wilson, who's a very much a very strong Christian. And Russell Wilson said, "Well, this show, God was with us, and I give." And Aaron Rodgers says, "Well, don't bring God into it. Okay, look, you were behind. We made a bunch of mistakes. You guys ended up winning, but don't assume that this shows the will of God and that you're God's team and it's God. This is destiny." You have to be very so. I'm with Aaron as far as this goes. That, and I would say that most people are not Russell Wilson. Most people, when they say, "Oh, it was a miracle that happened," a miracle, they don't necessarily believe that it was God. And I think when many of these films and are called miracles, it's true if they are Christian based, and you're going to talk about one specifically that was produced at a period that they were trying to promote an understanding of all of the major religions in the United States. Miracle meant miracle from God. But I'm going to actually talk about a film that I think the director and writer, when he uses the term miracle, is very much tongue-in-cheek. And in many ways, even perhaps a criticism on when Christianity is the ultimate miracle. Look, you reminded me off pod of an anthology series that lasted, I think, about 2 years in the 1950s called Crossroads. I think Chevrolet, which they like the title because, again, you're always going to go on the road with your Chevrolet. They liked that title, and they sponsored a program that was meant to be every week a investigation of a story, a religious story that occurred not just to a person of a member of that faith, but to a leader, either a priest, pastor, or rabbi, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yes. And
probably today, even watching that, you'd probably need a disclaimer from whoever who was allowed making that available. This was produced at a time that there was anti-Muslim feelings, so there aren't any imams or Muslims here.
I don't know if it was even anti-Muslim feelings as much as there was just the Islamic community was not as prominent in America at the time.
Right, I know. That's what I'm saying.
I remember, there was a lot of ignorance, but I remember, there was an episode of You Bet Your Life, and there was some kind of a weird puppet that was supposed to represent God, and Groucho Marx was not a religious person. He was very, very clear I remember reading his biography that his daughter wrote, and it was very clear that he was not a religious man, but this was, an expression. And they said, whether you call him, I think they said, whether you call him Christ or Jehovah or Muhammad, it shows just the ignorance of, that they, thinking of Muhammad as a deity, but also the very, very, vain and wrong attempt at inclusion was there. It was, but it was just an ignorant form of.
Look, I'll admit that even though in sheer numbers, the Islam was even in the 50s probably larger than its representation on screen, and part of it had to do with the fact that Jews we always punched above our weight, and therefore there might, in terms of population, Jews might have been a very small amount, but they obviously took a very large role in many, many areas of politics and in the entertainment industry. And I guess that's part of the reason why this program was Catholic, Protestant, and Jew. So the Crossroads program is available on Tubi and on YouTube. Tubi, I guess, in both places you're going to have to put up with some commercials. But what was the episode you had? And we're going to talk about episodes that have miracle in the title.
Right. So I spent, and so I found this, The Miracle of Faith. It's a season 2, episode 36. So it's probably one of the last episodes of Crossroads. And we have Conrad Nagel, who had a very illustrious and very prolific filmography, playing a contemporary Episcopal priest. Dr. John Large was the name of the priest in this episode. And you have, always in these shows, you had quite interesting cast. You had some rather prominent actors, or also maybe not as prominent, but actors with prominent careers in television and in film, as is this cast here. So basically, you have a story of a medical doctor played by Frank Wilcox, who appeared in a lot of movies that I'm familiar with. In fact, a lot of this cast were in a lot of the monster movies that everybody knows that I love. And so this doctor, he saved this old woman's life, she's paralyzed and unable to walk after this surgery that apparently saved her life. So she's being cared for by her son and daughter-in-law. The son is Robert Hutton.
Right, sure. Robert Hutton, of course, had a very nice career in Hollywood in the 60s. He's sort of like a proto Tom Hanks type of character.
And he was also in a lot of monster movies, the Slime People.
Okay, but before, Bob Hutton died much too young, but he was actually he almost, I wouldn't say became a household name. His son Timothy, of course, plays the troubled young man in Ordinary People.
Yeah, I met Timothy Hutton because I think he was married to Deborah Winger.
But just let's set the table. The narrator who introduced each program would say that these are actually based on events that occurred to actual clergymen, and it isn't just fictionalized. It's not like mystery or suspense or Twilight Zone, where we're just supposedly there was some minister who came to some housewife
based on actual events. And the opening credits, they say, pastor, priest, or rabbi. They made it clear that this was something that was a real person. Or in the end credits, they said that it was, they changed the names of the incidental people. But this woman, Mrs. Carpenter, she's stuck in bed, and so her son Paul, played by Robert Hutton, is caring for her, and his daughter and his wife Marion is also caring for her. And as soon as he leaves, the mother-in-law starts being excuse the word, but it's appropriate here. She's very, very bitchy to her daughter-in-law, and it's very it's a very difficult situation. And it seems that the son and the mother are both agnostics, and the daughter has some religion, and so she.
Right, that's Marion, played by the soap opera star Rachel Ames. She was actually she was the longest running performer on General Hospital.
Right. So exactly, and she had a big career, and so she invites this Dr. Large, who was a real person who, especially in chaplaincy, of the ministry of presence. And just when a chaplain or a clergy person makes a visit somewhere, our job is to represent, Kedusha, and even if we don't personally maybe live up to it, we're supposed to be a symbol of that. And this Conrad Nagel, who again,
So
he
he
has
playing Dr. Large, he comes to meet Mrs. Carpenter and to speak to
yeah,
her
and,
about God.
yeah, and he had a very this Nagel, by the way, his career was about a 50-year career from 1918 or so until 1967. So it was 49 years, almost 50 years of film career from the silent era into television.
So how do you think Conrad does in terms of representing a man of faith? How? Go ahead.
What 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 is interesting is his unmoving presenting here is an unwavering faith, just to be a symbol of faith without any psharas, without any compromise, without trying to water anything down. And the thing is, he's supposed to be an Episcopal priest. I've met a few Episcopal priests in my time. I never met such a
So in other
frum
words,
and he
this
was a very
Episcopal.
religious guy. This Dr. Large is much more religious than any Episcopalian I've ever met. But he's
So
just
he basically comes to the house. So I'm trying to
and he
get to
said,
the
yeah,
point.
and
And
he
he
tells this
tells her,
woman,
"Look, you're not gonna be able to be cured completely, but at least you're alive." Is that what he's telling her?
no, he's telling her that you should have faith that you could get up and walk again. And
I
and
see.
the medical doctor says, if it was just psychosomatic, I could agree, but there's something physically wrong. And but then so the son is saying, well, isn't all this talk going to hurt her?
The son's character
Is very
argues that religion is harmful here because
yeah
when religion wants to give you faith in the face of incredible odds, when it doesn't work, you end up being even more shattered than before. That was his argument.
yes.
And what is and what's the response that the priest
So
has to that?
well, not only the priest, because the medical doctor is there at the time, and the medical doctor says, no, it's not going to. There's not going to be any nezik. There's not going to be any harm from this. Let him do it. And the priest says, God can do miracles. And then they kept saying, well, you're going to cure her? He said, no, it's not. I'm going to cure her. God is going to heal her. God brings healing. But I've seen it. He said, he had an unwavering faith. He said, I've seen people who are almost blind live. I saw a baby that the doctors said would only have 2 hours to live, and we baptized the baby, and now the baby is fine and living and fine. And the same thing, you can get up out of this bed and you can walk. And so the doctor says, to the priest, in a different conversation, if you can get her to even agree to get into a wheelchair, that would already be a miracle. The shalom bias between the husband and wife got ruined with how rude and everything the mother was, and the wife was ready to leave. She left already, and the mother got up out of the bed, crawled because she couldn't walk, to the phone to call the priest to bring her to the hotel where the daughter-in-law was, to try to bring her back.
And this was something she wasn't able to do previously, to even get out of.
And then once, she even refused to. She wanted to be a nebuch. She wanted to be the victim. She wanted to be waited on. She wanted to have something to complain about.
Sometimes the miracle that is spawned really is internally. You are able to really generate it. Right? Yeah. It's almost like we're resisting God's bounty because of the threat that it has. Like you said, people want to wallow in victimhood. They want to be serviced. They want to be attended to. So did you see the miracle of faith there? Or was it?
So in the end, she did get up and stand and even try to walk a little bit. They had to tell her to sit down, but the couple, they were reunited. They didn't get divorced. And she was here she was, and she said, I hadn't been to church in 30 years, and now I'm going to start to go again, and God isn't going to be very happy with me. And then the priest said, no, God doesn't hold a grudge, which is like what the Tanya says, that such the B'nai Shalom is infinite, so his patience is infinite. If we really do tshuva, it doesn't matter how many times we fall, the B'nai Shalom forgives us. And it's the same idea. He said, you don't have to think that you're so far away, that it's not that you're a hypocrite or anything. No, you try it, you do it, and in the end, she found her faith, and she brought her son and daughter-in-law back together, and she got up, she tried to walk, and it seemed that it's indicated eventually she was totally rehabilitated and able to walk.
Right, and
the
in large part, it was due to the calming, as you said, the unwavering and words of a man of God, of someone representing God. So it sounds like a very nice program, and it's unfortunate, I think, Yitzchak, that here we are 70 years removed from the airing of that program, approximately, and obviously nothing like that would be shown on any of the standard networks today. It'd be it would only be on Christian TV. When you look at some of the comments, it's called an IMDb, you'll see that there are people who say, I remember this program and it influenced me to become a person, a clergyman. So despite the fact that it's right now just a curiosity on Tubi and YouTube, and really the symbol of a different time, as Eric Adams said just recently, when we took God out of the schools, it made a difference. A lot of flack saying it, and I'm not necessarily right. What all I'm saying is it was a different period, and although it was in a way a period that we could look at as somewhat repressive, and a period that didn't register Muslims and people of color, it was still a period where, on the surface, and perhaps even more, there was faith-based programs. That were meant to be ecumenical. As you say, there are some rabbi episodes which you happen to like. I also noted that in the IMDb page, it mentions that, and on the Wikipedia, they mentioned that Crossroads, they made efforts that the actors that would be playing the ministers, the priests, the rabbis, should be of that same religion that they represented, which I thought was also.
I said, they didn't necessarily do that. Like I said, Vincent Price played the rabbi. It's not
right. Although he has an.
He also played a minister in another episode. But
I would assume if you could get Vincent Price in the 50s in your show, you took him no matter what he was going to play.
Is, he bore a strong resemblance to Gershom Sheshes. If you look at Gershom Sheshes, the pictures we have of Gershom Sheshes, there was a very strong resemblance.
Okay, all right. So I think your choice in terms of miracle of faith, I think, was more connected, perhaps, to the way we should look at miracles. That faith can help people psychologically through difficult situations.
Was that they were trying to reduce it to something psychological, but in the end, I think the message was it really was something supernatural. It wasn't merely
that prayer comes in different forms, and God can heal. And I think that is something that is a life affirming message, and perhaps we should, correctly call that as miracle. Let me now talk about the film from approximately about 13 years earlier, called Miracle of Morgan Creek, which is one of Preston Sturgis's screwball comedies made in the middle of the war. It is a extremely biting satire of so many things, but the thing that the sacred cow that he is attacking is the purity and importance of the troops that were going over to fight World War II. We all know that this was the good war, the war that we were cajoled into eventually, and that we were going there to save the world. We were going there to right the rights. And one could probably, looking back 80 years later, say that it was, of course, the entry of that great giant, the United States, that was able to turn the tide, and the threat of Hitler was eliminated. The Russians have a lot to say about that as well. But there's no question about it that that was the myth that we were going to save not only our shores, obviously, but the whole world from the threat of tyranny. And that's what it meant to be an American. America was exceptional in that way. And that's really at the end of World War II. That is why nation building and other types of diplomacy were built on that. What Preston Sturges does in this film, and similar to what Billy Wilder did in the film that we highlighted a couple of months ago, A Foreign Affair, show that the American troops, especially the ones that were stateside and being sent out, were the same ribald, wild, undisciplined children that they were always. The fact that there's this new veneer of nobility being placed on them, that they're going to fight Hitler and they're going to fight for democracy, didn't actually change much about innate human nature. In this fictional little town of Morgan Creek, somewhere in the Midwest, Sturges brings back Brian Donlevy and Akim Tamiroff as McGinty and the boss, who you sort of don't know what's happening to them at the end of The Great McGinty, which is one of the greatest political satires ever put onto screen. And he actually uses them as the framing device. Sturges was always original in terms of giving you that punch in the face, that first minute. What is going on? Like, what's happening? Like, here's something fantastic is happening in Morgan Creek, a small town in the Midwest. So basically, what you have is an event is happening. Something is going on. The governor is being called by somebody. You're not sure who. It seems like he's a newspaper man about an incredible event that's happening. And of course, now the flashback occurs. Now, what is this great event? And why does the governor have to be called in on it? And this is where, Sturges leads you along, and you eventually come to realize that what's happened here is that a young girl who is the beauty of the town, she's played by Betty Hutton, who had a very nice career in Hollywood afterwards, is waiting, and this is her, she's going to go out on the town and basically give the troops a send-off. He's going to give the troops a send-off that they should be able to go into battle happy. Now, what did that mean, these dances, right? So externally, it meant they happened in church basements. They happened in the town halls. But we know what it was really about. But what it was about was a night of debauchery. And basically, these events were about servicing the servicemen before they would go, and it was considered almost a patriotic duty. Now, Sturges is careful to say they would get married, and maybe that was in order to avoid the Hays Code. And maybe those marriages did happen. I mentioned the film a number of months ago called The Clock, where with Judy Garland, where the young serviceman, they decide to get married before he goes off to war, but with the intent perhaps to come back. It wasn't just a way to give a night of love, but maybe actually to build a life afterwards. But in this film, it's clear that the marriage, if they do happen, is a canard. And it's just a way for to give the servicemen a wild night of partying and sex. Betty Hutton, who is the daughter of the town constable, and who was played by William Demarest. And of course, William Demarest, along with a number of other great character actors like Walter Brennan, Edgar Buchanan, and others, had a career playing the second banana, the friend, the wise guy. Many people know him, of course, from the years of episodes in My Three Sons with the other Hollywood stalwart Fred McMurray. But Demarest was at his greatest in the 1940s. He was already 50 years old at that time, but he was fantastic in terms of slapstick. His vaudevillian experience allowed him to take pratfalls, and he probably falls on his back about 6 or 7 times in this film trying to kick somebody. I can't say that. All I can say is I laughed every single time he was trying to do it. He is the town constable, and he has 2 young daughters, one 14, and the most precocious, mature 14-year-old I think ever put on screen. That wasn't supposed to be devious, and Betty and his older daughter, Gertrude, Trudy, and she's the one, of course, who sees it her patriotic duty to go out. Now, there is a town Nebish played by Eddie Bracken. Eddie Bracken was also in a number of Sturgis's films. In fact, even that same year, the film known as Hail the Conquering Hero had Eddie Bracken in it, and he played also a fellow from a small town who actually comes back after being discharged, I think, from the war, and embarrassed that he did not have the same sort of hero stripe as others, and there's a whole lie behind it. So again, both of these films, by the way, were nominated in that year. They were made a year or two after each other, but they were released in the same year, and they're both nominated for Best Original Screenplay. Sturgis, after he wrote the screenplay of The Great McGinty, which he didn't direct, he was determined that he would be the total auteur of his films, and of course he wrote the screenplays and directed them, and he developed, I think, one of the most unique styles. And I know you're a big Howard Hawks fan. I know that you enjoy his screwball comedies. Sturgis is in another league. True, there's a little bit of Lubitsch, a little bit of Hawks. Sturgis is a progression from both of them. And I love Lubitsch. I think Lubitsch is, and Sturgis knew how much he owed him. In Sturgis's masterpiece, Sullivan's Travels, the main character played by Joel McRae, mentions Lubitsch along with many others. But Sturgis was doing something different, something a little more American, a little more unique. And Sturgis really did try to have a great cross representation of America in his films. It's been discussed what happened to Sturgis after Unfaithful Years with Rex Harrison. Why did he fall off the face of the earth? What happened to him? Why wasn't he able to make it? Part of it had to do perhaps with when he died. But this film is really Sturgis at the peak of his powers. And the film has Eddie Bracken is this Nebish. Eddie Bracken is a person who can't get into the war. He's constantly, his blood pressure and spots constantly go up every time he gets nervous. So he is the ultimate 4F. But he pines over Trudy, and he's been in love with her since the time they were little children together. And she, of course, in a way, uses him. She's cruel to him because she knows that if her father, tough-nosed Officer Cockenlocker, I mean, you can't get away with that today unless you're perhaps, his name is Cockenlocker. You probably, unless you're Ben Stiller, I don't know if you can get away with that today. But Officer Cockenlocker and his 2 daughters, he refuses to let his daughter go out. He's read in the paper about what's going on with these boys. He served in World War I. He knows what it is to be a soldier. In fact, there's another little tough sergeant who tells him today's army is a little bit different. You have to treat them with psychology. But she uses Norville, Eddie Bracken's character, as a ruse to get out of the house, and meanwhile to leave him at a triple feature where she doesn't pick him up until the morning. And she goes to that church social. And again, in order to satisfy the censors, there's a scene where they're picking her up in a wild dance, and she bangs her head on one of the lamps hanging from the ceiling, which supposedly gave her such a sort of sense of amnesia or something that's happening or in her mind, that by the time she returns in the morning, and poor Norville has been sitting outside the movie theater, sleeping in the entranceway of the town's theater, she shows up with the car, which has been obviously in a number of accidents. And you can tell that there's a just married sign that is somehow slipped off of the car. In other words, she discovers, and the Jewish doctor tells her that she is pregnant. Of course, he's going to be very discreet about it. And now, with her pregnancy, now comes her shame. And she has to tell Norville, because again, this is what her little sister says. Norville is the perfect patsy. He'll be the one who will somehow marry her and cover up her shame for her dad that she ended up. She has no memory of the marriage. She remembers his name was Ratzi Wiki with a Z, and she has no idea what his name is. And she can't find her marriage license, and she doesn't know who he is. And once again, Norville is there to perhaps do the noble thing. But unlike in the beginning, where she's very cruel to him, despite the fact that she seems to be a great girl and everybody loves her, her use of Norville is quite disgusting. And today, I think, would have been seen as your typical mean girl type of manipulation. But when Norville expresses to her how much he's loved her from day one, and he'll accept her even if, she's carrying somebody else's child, and that she went out and eventually, got married or had sex with another fellow, he's willing to be the noble person. In fact, he comes up with an idea, and which he's helped with by the Jewish tailor in town, who discovers some sort of military costume for him from World War I. And it's there that they go to some justice of the peace in some other adjoining town, hoping to make her marriage legal. And based on her faulty memory of what this guy's name is, he's willing he's going to do something better for her. Not that he's going to become her husband and live with her and be the putative father of her children. He's going to pretend that he's the original fellow, to allow her to have a marriage certificate that somehow when the child is born, she can say that she is Mrs. whoever she is, and the child is unfortunately a war orphan. And this is what he was willing to do, to just be the stick figure. Of course, when he comes to the justice of the peace smells a rat, because he signs his name Norville Jones instead of signing his name Ratzi Wiki, whatever the name that they had come up with. Turns out, of course, that he's then summarily arrested for imitating a soldier and for kidnap, because then it turns out that she is underage, that she's even too young to have engaged in marriage in the first place. All of this, of course, reveals to William Demarest what his daughter has done. And here, Demarest, instead of playing one note, actually comes to understand and realizes the love he has for his daughter, despite her wrongly the wrong decision she made that night. And he realizes the nobility of this fellow, who, although he can't get into the army, he's basically a nebbish, a dweeb, as we would say, that he has shown courage and love to his family. And he allows him to escape, despite the fact that this is going to be something that is illegal and will make him even more of a fugitive. Anyway, as the film progresses, somehow he escapes. I think they come in. The two girls come and somehow get him out. And as the film sort of rushes towards its ending, Betty Hutton, Trudy's boss in the record store, his name is played by Julius Tannen, also a very famous character actor, Jewish fellow. And his name is Mr. Rafferty, but he plays him totally with the most Jewish accent that you've ever heard. In fact, he's of course, yes, I take care of you. So you have the three Jews, like the three wise men, who are basically helping this woman, the doctor, the tailor, and the record shop owner, and they end up somehow spiriting her away to some place, because the Cockenlockers are now involved in this investigation of fraud and escaping, and he lost his job, but she's being taken care of. Now, you never see the Hays Code didn't allow a woman to be seen in later stages of pregnancy like that. They always had to be covered up. There was something prudish and ridiculous about whoever, Joseph Breen and all these other strange people, that you could not show that. But she's obviously very much pregnant, and she's been taken care of by her old Jewish boss, who is right. And of course, again, Sturgis throws in a Christmas scene, a toiki, I'm going to bring you a toiki. And there is and Demarest has a talk with her, and they talk about Jesus, and the comparison to Jesus is very obvious, right? I was thinking that it's very similar, Yitzchak, to the Midrashic version of Orpah. What happened to Orpah on the night that she leaves Naomi? And she ends up, of course, giving birth to Goliath, because something very similar happens here. What happens here, and this is the great miracle of Morgan Creek, is that it is that when she goes to the hospital, she ends up having 6 kids, sextuplets, 6 boys. And this is the incredible miracle of Morgan Creek. And, Sturgis gives us like a newsreel type of montage. Canada wants to know if it's a hoax, because they had twins had been born in Canada a number of years earlier. And there actually weren't surviving sextuplets, I think, until in the 60s or the late 50s. So this was considered, quite a big thing that, all over the world, Mussolini, can't believe it. And somehow this is, they even have Hitler at the end of the movie, in terrible rage, that how can America be able to produce, 6 kids? Well, so here we have, the miracle of an incredible birth that generally doesn't happen. That was the byproduct of a wild night on the town. And this is the miracle of Morgan Creek, which in a way is really, aligning with the miracle of the virgin birth, the miracle of 6 being born. And the fact that if it happened in America, that's a sign that God is on our side. Of course, the problem is that Norville is a wanted criminal, and what can we do? And of course, the governor is able, with his incredible powers of governing, and to overturn all the laws and be able to write special decrees that'll turn out that he wasn't imitating an officer, that he'd always been an officer, and that somehow he's going to be the father of all these children, which, of course, at the end of the movie, Norville can't believe that, as he's told, that he's now going to have to be, when he's taken to the nursery by his sister-in-law, and she shows all 6 that are in the bassinets, and all of them are now going to be his children, his boys, that he's going to have to take care of. So I've spoiled the film completely, but I thought it was really a very, Sturgis was really, in a way, playing with our idea of miracle, our idea of conflating patriotism with religion, our idea of assuming God is on our side, the idea that the birth of a child has to be a miracle, and that's the way religions start, right? It's a miracle that you can have 6 kids born. It's a miracle that somehow a virgin could give birth. And I think that by calling the film Miracle of Morgan Creek, I think he's, really, in a way, being extremely cynical on what we ascribe to God, and perhaps even, even the most essential religions. On the other hand, I think what he brings to the fore is that behind the sometimes idiotic ways people act, there are people who can change and show their better sides, whether it's a Demarest Cockenlocker who stops being this, this complaining old guy about the old days and constantly trying to kick people, or even Betty Hutton's character, who realizes that she has been using her beauty to her advantage and is taking advantage of this young fellow, and realizes that this this schleppy dweeb has more to him than perhaps any of the the wonderful tough hunk guys that are out there fighting the war, which again is a sacred cow to that Sturgis is trying to, I guess, roast. It doesn't have the star power of Palm Beach Story with Claudette Colbert and Joel McRae. It's not as beautifully acted as The Lady Eve with Henry Fonda and Barbara Stanwyck. But if you are looking for a film that is slapstick and has a way to maybe think about what miracles are and what they aren't, Miracle in Morgan Creek, I think, is the ticket. So that's it, my friends. Watch your step on the way out. We'll catch you in some miraculous fashion, hopefully next week. Take care.
Thanks for joining us for another episode from the Yeshiva of Newark at IDT Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss a single episode.